Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February Lancaster Real Estate Investment Meeting. You guys can, there's still a couple of seats up here. If you guys are looking for seats back there, there's still some empty seats up front here. And a couple extra chairs in the back too. So hopefully everybody can find a spot. So thanks for coming out tonight, guys. Just curious, how many are here for the very first time? A nice handful. Thanks for coming out. Hope you get some value out of the meeting. My name is Jake Byler. I've been a part of this meeting for a good number of years. And I say this every time, but I just love getting around a group of people like this, sharing, learning, and a lot of good things happen when you get a good group of people like this together in a meeting. So I get excited about this. Most of you guys know that these meetings are primarily paid for by sponsors, and you generally hear their names every meeting. Our sponsors for this year are Chet Lapp, Providence Abstracting Company. Chet did a short talk at our last meeting. Ben Yoash, local realtor. We're going to hear from him shortly with a bit of a market update. Molly from Lanco Federal Credit Union. Jeff Moeller, he is in the room here. Jeff Moeller is a private lender. Joe Liofsky, Compass Property Management. We're going to hear from him just shortly as well. And Dave Wolf, PMG Mortgage. So those are the guys that basically pay for our room rental and the expenses that we have for the year. You guys are probably mostly familiar with the facilities here, but if you're not, the closest restrooms to this room would be out the back doors to your left and up around the corner there. If you are not on our email list and you would like to be added, there's a paper on the table in the back of the room with instructions that tells you how you can get on our email list. And Joe, I'm going to have you come up. Joe's going to tell us a little bit about what they do at Compass Property Management and talk a little bit about the services that they provide. So I'm going to switch over to mics.
Thank you, Jake. I'm Joe Liofsky, Compass Property Management. I've been managing properties for a couple of decades now in Lancaster County and Chester County. And I was kind of thinking of, it's been a long time, but how and why I got started. My first property, when I first bought it, I thought I was so smart. I got it cheap, rented it out, was making money. But as time went on, I realized I wasn't so smart because I bought it with a partner. And that's problems, owning it and selling it. I thought I was going to, do myself a favor and have the tenant do work in the house, and he put in a heating system, which didn't work out so good. Now this is going back a few decades. This is back in the 80s, so give me a little bit of break. Didn't get a permit for it, so ran into trouble with the city, and then found out that I didn't have a rental license. Of course, you have to have a rental license. So. Yeah, well, having bought the property correct at a good price and getting it rented was only part of the battle. The rest of the battle is making sure you got a good lease, making sure you know what you're doing, making sure you got good vendors to keep it, maintain it, and repair it. And then what's your exit strategy? If you're not going to keep it for forever, well, I had to buy the property twice because I had to buy my partner out to keep the property. By the time it was all said and done, I probably about broke even on it, but I got a hell of an education, But it was kind of expensive. So that's maybe not the way you want to do it. So if you're really good at finding properties, buying properties, you want to rent them out, but you don't want to deal with all the administration, dealing with HUD, dealing with leases, papers, and forms, maybe you want to get a property manager. So after doing this myself for 15 or 20 years, that's kind of how I started. The first eviction I did, I didn't really know what I was doing. And you kind of go by trial and error, and trial and error can be really expensive. So it's probably something that everybody in this room could do, but I wouldn't suggest everybody in this room does it because it's maybe not what you're just cut out to do, and maybe your time is better spent finding another deal, getting another deal, or fixing another property than worrying about the 8 or 10% that you're going to pay a property manager. Hopefully, by the time it's all said and done, we're actually going to end up making you more money, getting the place rented quicker, getting a higher rent for you, and a whole lot less headaches. So that's the goal at Compass Property Management. Like I said, we manage properties in Lancaster County and Chester County. And yeah, I kind of been doing this for about 4 decades now. That's it. So Jake, I'm done. I'm done.
So we will probably end up having Joe do a presentation sometime later on this year. He has transitioned to mostly investing in mobile home parks because he would rather rent out dirt and rent out lots right now. So he's been a big fan of mobile home parks, so we might get him to do a presentation on that and just some long-term investing concepts. So that'll probably be coming sometime later this year. Benyo Esh. Benyo, you can come on up. Benyo is, like I said, Benyo is one of our sponsors, local real estate agent, and he's going to give us a bit of a rundown on some things happening in the real estate market.
Thank you, Jake. Always good to be here. Let's see if we can transfer this without too much drama. Does that work?
That's good.
Yeah, there we go. So you've gotten used to seeing us putting up our fancy slides, Chris and I. That's not going to happen tonight. And the reason is I thought the data was doing one thing, and I actually pulled the data up, and it's doing the other thing. So just since the holidays, personally, I've seen a whole bunch more activity in the markets. A lot more buyers coming out, a lot more multiple offer situations, all of that fun stuff. It just doesn't reflect in the data yet. January was actually a down month, and the last 6 months or so have been pretty level after, well, yeah, I mean, we had the crazy uptick for the COVID years, and then, since interest rates tamped that down a bit, it's been more level. So that's sort of been continuing. But what I've really seen in the market with people surging back in, I mean, I'll just give several examples from the last several weeks. I had one that was not so fun on the buyer's side. Little townhome outside of Lancaster City that went on the market for $250. Well, they ended up with 23 offers and sold for $303. And the winning bidder had an escalation clause up to $330,000. So I was on the wrong side of that one, unfortunately. A more fun one was just put a 4-unit on the market a month or so ago. One that I own, just said, hey, if someone's out there for a great number, I'll sell it. So that went on the market for $559, sold with multiple offers at $575 pretty much immediately. And then another fun one was, Lynn will be coming up here soon as well. So he had a sweet little 4-unit in Leola. We hit the market a couple months ago, knowing that I always thought that the comps bore it out, right? But the funny thing was, this place had sat on the market before Lynn had bought it for $600. This was a couple years ago at the height of the market. And this, Lynn paid $600 for it, but it sat on the market at $650, $660 for a while. So that was sort of okay, how's this going to work out? But let's try it because, Lynn doesn't need it to sell tomorrow. So let's see what we can get out of this thing. And now 2 months in, it's under contract at full price with multiple offers after some time on the market. So that's some of, it's really interesting to see how you can look at the data and see one thing, but what's happening on the ground can be a different thing. And in this case, it's largely just because inventory is so constrained. So anything good that comes to the market, reasonably priced, there's going to be a bunch of buyers for it. Some cases, if it's super unique, you might see something slightly different. But yeah, the market's starved for inventory. If you've got something, I've sort of been telling buyer or sellers that, well, you might want to consider waiting for spring for the combination of lower interest rates and the spring market. But I'm starting to think that might not be the greatest advice after all. And so what are interest rates going to do? This is always a fun one, right? Jake, you probably saw this, the article that Darryl Eberly sent out today too. Maybe not. Probably some of you in the room did. So it's really interesting. And one big takeaway from it is, a lot of people have been saying, hey, rates are coming down in the spring, right? Well, they've pretty much come out and said they're not coming down at the March meeting. So now we're looking at May until we see rates come down, and they're also leaving the door open to them going back up instead of coming down. So we'll see how that plays out. They're basically just watching inflation, and from what I understand, it's, they're looking at that 2% target, as they've been talking about for a long time. We've ticked up slightly since last June again, hovering between 3 and 4. So until that comes down to 2 or closer to it, we might be sitting at current rates for a while. And yeah, so we'll see. Just don't bank on those lower rates is one takeaway I'd take from that. You know, if you need to refinance stuff this year, you know, I'm hoping it works out for you. I just don't put yourself in a position where you need that to happen. And that's a part of why I think the spring rush is happening, is people are saying, hey, rates are going to come down. We want to get into the market and buy something before that happens, and there's the mad rush back into the markets. So I think that's a part of what's driving the current activity. So that's my take on the market. If you want to argue me on it, do it later. So one other thing, Jake gave me a little room to run with tonight, so I'm going to take advantage of that a little bit. But who was here when Chris Good talked about his 46% return on your typical real estate investment? A whole bunch of people in the room. Who thought that's a little outrageous? Like, that can't really be real, right? Anyone? Nobody? Everybody thinks it's totally achievable? I'll go with that. And I grew up in a household where if you were pitched something that you'll get better than an 8% return, it's probably a scam. Don't do it. So, you know, I come with my fair share of skepticism. But I'd like to share a little personal story of something that returned 550% a year over the last 7 years. Anyone curious? Anyone get a kick out of hearing that? Yeah, so we'll go for it. Now, I'll preface it with one thing. Don't get too hung up on the returns. It sounds really good to say 550, right? You know, 550%. The reality is it started with a really small number, so it's not quite as crazy as it sounds. But the way it broke down for me was, this was back in 2017. I was very new to the business. I thought I had some experience at that point. It might have been property somewhere between like number 5 and 10, purchase-wise. But I bought a little Lancaster City townhome, you know, humble little place, $45,000, already had a tenant. Yeah, didn't think much of the deal. It's like, well, this fits. You know, I'm trying to build cash flow at that point. Not too concerned about the quality of asset as long as it cash flows. So owned that till beginning of 2019, so about a year and a half. The tenant moved out. The market had moved enough that I said, let's see if I can sell it. So ended up getting $104,000 for it and walked away with $63,000. So, well, going back to the beginning, I had put $9,900 of my own cash into it. So the $63,000 that came out, say I just about broke even with cash flow and putting a little bit of work into it. So I thought that was pretty cool. That was what? I did the math on this. Now I need to find it and share that. So it was about a 600% return. I thought that was pretty cool. You know, 6x your money in a year and a half without really doing any work. So that was pretty cool. And I never did pocket that money. I never even saw it. Just did a 1031 exchange into the next one, which was a 4-unit in Lancaster City. Again, didn't think much of it. Paid $219 for it, which was about the going rate for what it was at the time. It's like, I'm not sure that this deal is going to work out well, but let's try it. I don't want to pay taxes on that $63,000, so let's just do that. So I just sold that one earlier this week. Jeff Moeller did the exchange for me. Always appreciate Jeff doing that. So the way those numbers bore out is, so I sold it for $572 after paying $219 for it. We put some money into it over time. We'd also, so I bought it for $219. Got seller financing up front, and then ended up refinancing into like an 80% loan with Bank of Bird in hand, and actually pulled $30,000 out of it tax-free with that refinance. And then we just pulled another $320 out of it, and there was also another refinance in between there. So ultimately, what happened is that just under $10,000 became $380,000 in the course of about 7 years. So there's your 550% a year return for doing very little work. That's the coolest part about it. We've had some fun flipping, had some flips go really well, and some sideways. But seeing that happen with very little work put into it was pretty sweet. And guess where the 330 is going? Another 1031. Let's keep it rolling. I want to come back in 2 years and continue that story. So that's about what I've got for that, except, there's probably a lesson or two to come out of that. One thing that I'd take from it, if you're newer to the game, I know there's a few people in the room that are, don't be afraid to start small. I had no clue what I was doing back in 2017 relative to today. But sometimes it's just about stepping out and doing something. Another thing would be that, what we pulled out of that property is still meaningful to me today, but it's become a lot more fun to add some zeros to those numbers. Like imagine if I started with like a $400,000 property and made that kind of spread and then kept it moving, which we've done some of that now too. It's just, but you got to start where you are. And the other thing would be, like, there's a lot of value in keeping an eye on your portfolio and thinking about trading, especially if it's lower quality assets into higher quality assets as your portfolio sort of matures. And don't be afraid to, even if it's a great asset and it fits well, if you can get enough of a premium for it, it could be worth thinking about. In this case, the 4-unit that we made the gain on at the end it's exactly the kind of property I like to own. High quality asset, great part of town, cash flows, 30 grand a year. But at the end of the day, for me, it was about, well, if I can sell it and pull 330 out of it, I know I can go reinvest that and do much better than that 30, so I'm going to do it. So there's some things to think about. Hopefully that helps someone.
Good. So when you hear something like that and returns like that, you're like, well, it seems like it would actually be hard to lose. And believe me, I've figured out ways to lose. But that's a pretty cool story. That's a really powerful example of just rolling it forward into the next deal and all of that. So thanks for sharing that. I forgot my notepad. So tonight, right here, we have the great pleasure of having Lynn Weaver here. Lynn is one of the owners of Shady Maple. And he actually spoke at our meeting back in November of 2020. You remember that, Lynn? I actually saw a picture of that lately. It was at the Intercourse Fire Hall, and there were a bunch of tables. How many people remember that? The tables at the Intercourse Fire Hall. It's like 15% of you maybe. My guess is there might have been 50, 60 people in the room back then. So the group has grown a bit since that. But like I said, Lynn is one of the owners of Shady Maple. Been in the family business for 35 years, I think your bio said. And I love hearing Lynn talk about these stories, talk about stuff. In my opinion, he's just a very practical, very relatable Lancaster County kid that grew up. A lot of people look at Shady Maple as this wild thing, and it is. We're just a couple 100 feet away from the longest buffet in the U.S., right? That's pretty cool. I mean, that probably wasn't your dad's goal or your goal when you started out, but it's grown into quite a business. I got to tell you this. I got a call from Claire Hoover this morning. He's in Florida. And for those of you that know Claire Hoover, you know that he likes to joke around. So you'll appreciate you'll understand this better if you know Claire Hoover. But he says, he said, be careful with that guy you have come and speak at the meeting tonight. He said, last time I heard him speak there at Shady Maple, he acted like he owned the place. So that's a classic Claire Hoover joke. For those of you that were here last month when I did a presentation, you might remember me talking about the benefit. One of the benefits of owning real estate is the fact that it's going to give you problems, and then you have to learn how to solve problems. And I don't doubt that Lynn has gotten quite a bit of experience with that. They have, I think, around 800 employees here. And a couple of years ago, when COVID came through and they had to shut a bunch of stuff down, I'm sure there was a lot of tough decisions and conversations around all that. I think Lynn is going to touch on some of that tonight. So yeah, I think instead of me taking any more time, I think we're going to turn it over to Lynn. So please help me welcome Lynn Weaver.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it so much. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. What an honor to be here. It's going to be a fun night tonight. My style when I speak is just more of a conversation, sitting by a fire, hanging out, having a good time together. I'm not a professional speaker. I like to have fun. That's one of my core values. So hopefully everybody has fun tonight. Hopefully everybody has a good time. Thanks, Jake. I always just really appreciate being friends with Jake. He's an amazing guy. Every time I'm with him, I'm sure everybody else can agree with this, when you're with him, when they leave, they feel better about themselves, they feel better about life. He's just really a great guy to hang out with. So thanks, Jake, for organizing this and all the work you put into it. But just one quick story before we get into what I wanted to talk about tonight is yesterday we had a meeting here in this room, and this wall was not here, so it was the whole section. It was a dairy meeting. Was anybody here for that meeting yesterday? It was a dairy conference, seminar, something. No hands going up? Good. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, it was a really interesting meeting. It was all about dairy and breeding and cows and all that other stuff I know nothing about. But it was a really conservative crowd. A lot of people that here were a lot of Amish conservative people and Joanna and Mennonites, and which is awesome. It was a great crowd, and I was watching everybody interact, and then it was time to eat. And they went over the smorgasbord for lunch, and wow, can them people eat? And, I mean, they got all their food, and the amazing part was every single plate was completely clean. I mean, there wasn't a speck on it. One of the dishwashers was like, what is going on? These plates are so clean, we might as well just put them back in the system. Why clean them? He didn't. We did put them through the dishwasher, don't worry. But and another employee's like, what happened? Like, did they take a piece of bread and like wipe it clean and eat the bread? I'm like, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, and then the second funny part was, when it was time for dessert, the ice cream machine, we have 3 really good ice cream machines. No, 4. And they're good quality ice machines. They barely could keep up. It seems like everybody was supporting the seminar with the dairy, and everybody got ice cream. And it was just really interesting. Our vision, values, and mission is we serve all with honor and integrity. And I love just seeing all the people, different people that come through these doors each and every day. And lastly, another employee came up to me and was like, did you see all the hats out in the lobby? I'm like, yeah, I saw the hats. And they're like, that's a lot of hats. I'm like, yeah. They're like, how do they know which is theirs when they get up to leave? And I'm like, he's like, oh, I bet I know what happens. They just grab a random one and one size fits all. I doubt that happens. But it's just funny to see different people's perception and different people's like what they perceive when people are here. So it's good to be here. I hope everybody gets something out of this tonight. My goal is that I can just drop one nugget that helps somebody change their thinking, or just help somebody maybe create a good habit, a good pattern, or gets rid of some stinking thinking, I call it. If I can do one of them things, I'm going to be like, yes, that was a fun night. I enjoyed that night. And if you don't know it or not, but we all have blind spots. We all get into habits. I've been investing since I was 18 years old in different things. I love what Daniel said, start small. I think that's brilliant advice. If you're young and your net worth is X amount, start small. It's a great way to learn. It's not as bad if you make a big mistake. Some of my first investments were horrible. Wow, I'm glad I didn't have more money invested. And then other ones went really well, and you learn from it, and you keep going from that. But that's some of the stuff I want to talk about tonight, is just some of the learning I had over the years, some of the different things that we went through and we did that helped us learn, that I feel can be applied to any industry. A lot of you are here for investing, but our business is food, and a lot of that can be applied to almost any industry. So we're all about food here. That's what we do. That's what we are. So I'm just curious. And as I said before, this is going to be interactive. So I want you guys to call things out. But start thinking about in your head, like, what is your favorite food on earth? If you, tomorrow, if you wanted to have the best meal you ever had, what would be the main ingredient? I'll tell you what mine is, for example. You said shrimp. Mine is, anybody ever see them little Maryland or Delaware blue crabs? And anybody ever eat them? I want to show a hand how many people ate blue crabs. Quite a few people, I'm surprised. Anyway, that to me is the best food on earth. And as I reflect on the day, I wonder why do I like that so much? There's a lot of good food out there. I I don't know if there's anything I don't like. I like about any food out there. And I started reflecting on this, like, why do I really like this food? And I think it's because when I was little, one of the things my dad used to do with me is he used to take us, we used to go out in the water with a little boat, catch crabs, and then take them back and cook them and eat them. And that memory of catching the crabs, spending time with my dad, I think that's why that memory comes back every time I eat these, and that's what makes it so special. But did anybody ever catch crabs in the water and net them out of the water and put them in a basket and eat them that way? There's a couple people in here, but I mean, these crabs, if you never did it before, you've got to do it. It is so much fun. You catch this crab, you get it out of the water, you put it in a basket, then you gotta measure the thing. So what you do is you grab the thing and you hold it up to measure it to see if it's not big enough, you gotta throw it back. And half the time when you're measuring this little crab, if you don't hold it just perfect, they can reach your little pinchers around and grab you right on the hand. And it hurts. I mean, it's bleeding, blood's running down your arm. It's great. And if you've never experienced that, you've got to do it one time, because it's fun taking people along and never did it before. You're like, yeah, just grab the crab. It's no big deal. It don't hurt much. And then you get to watch all the expressions. But now we usually use gloves, and it got pretty boring. But back when I was 18, it was really cool to not use gloves and to catch these crabs and put them in a basket. But anyway, you said shrimp. Who else? What's a favorite food? Brisket? Cool. We serve both of them, by the way. What else? Steak? Yeah, we serve that too. Anyway, we'll get into actually what I want to talk about tonight. So we're going to start with some fun facts about Shady Maple. The first one, and I just read this book, and I really, really liked it. Did anybody ever read The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy? Oh, a lot of hands. Wow. Anyway, I just read this book. A friend of mine suggested I read it, and I was like, wow, that is probably my top 5 books, and I read a lot. But so whoever guesses, we're going to take 3 guesses. Whoever guesses closest is going to get this book for free. How many donuts did we make last year for the complex? And we also wholesale donuts to about 40 different wholesalers outside of here. So first 3 guesses, closest guess gets the book. Who's going to start guessing? 5 million? 30 million. 1 billion. I was expecting you to say like 100,000 or maybe 200,000. 3 million. Who said that? 3 million. Wow. 3.84 million is what we did. So, and the crazy part is we still do it the old-fashioned way, where it's just a fryer, like a French fry fryer, and you put the donut in, and then you got to wait till it's ready and flip it with the chopsticks and wait and then get it back out. So I'm looking at automating that. They say once you're about 3-4 million donuts a year, you got to go automation. So that's something we're looking at doing. How many free birthdays do you think we gave away last year? If you don't know it, I'm going to put a little ad in here in case you don't know this or not. But if you come here on your birthday, your meal is completely free. So if you don't come here on your birthday, next year you better be here. And bring 20 people with you, by the way. But how many free birthdays do you think we gave away last year? 10,000, 30,000, one more. We did 91,000 last year. And our record was right before COVID, we did 99,000 in 1 year. We're trying to hit 100,000, that's our goal. So you guys can help us get to that goal. How many remodels do you think the farm market did? The farm market started in 1970, was the original grocery store. It was 3,000 square feet, no air conditioning, just this tiny little building. Basically, my grandpa, my dad grew produce along the road, grew produce and sold it in this little building. And then we built on, and the one wall is actually still standing there today. And we built onto this thing quite a few times. So how many times do you think we built onto the store to get it where it's at now? 9? It was actually 17 official remodels. We had to go through zoning, land development, water runoff, sewer, the whole things. But 17 major remodels. The last remodel we did was about $1.8 million. and we're looking at doing another remodel probably within 2 years. So this is an interesting business. We have a lot of fun with it. It's exciting and blessing to be part of it. My next point that Jake put on the agenda that he sent out to you guys, or the email he sent out to you, is turning mistakes into opportunities. That's a good one. I mean, Jake and I were going back and forth, like, what am I supposed to talk about tonight? Like, 4 years ago was a long time. A lot happened in the last 4 years. And I don't even remember what I talked about 4 years ago. Maybe you guys do. I don't have any idea. I think I talked about the first investment I did in my 20s where I lost a lot of money. That was a good story. But anyway, like, we're going back and forth. What do we talk about tonight? And Jake sort of said, talk about whatever you want. And he gave me a couple of things that maybe I can talk about. And so I want to talk a little about turning mistakes into opportunities. And because when you're a teenager, some of you guys here might be a teenager still yet, but if you're anything like I was, like, you're thinking, man, I know pretty much. I can do anything. I can climb Mount Everest. I can do this. I can do everything. And you start thinking, like, anything's possible. Then you hit your 20s, and you're still sort of in that mode, but reality starts hitting. And for myself, I got married 21, started having kids, and then you're like, wow, like, I got kids. I got responsibility. If I do this investment and it goes bad, where's that going to leave me? I don't want to sell my house. And your mind starts thinking in just a little bit different way than when you were a teenager. Then when you hit your 30s, it starts shifting again a little bit, where you start maturing, you get a little more knowledge, you start learning from mistakes, you start being willing to take risk again, but you do it with a little bit more wisdom. Then you hit your 40s, and you're like, by the way, I'm 48. I know I look like I'm 29, but I'm 48. But then when you're in your 40s, if you're anything like I was, like, you can almost be like, wow, do I still want to take risk? Or do I want to be where I'm comfortable? And I don't know. I'm just not comfortable being comfortable. One of my best friends told me, he said, you know what? He said, I think your comfort zone is going to be your coffin. And I never forgot that. And basically what he was saying is, you need to know what you're called to do. If God called you to grow business, grow business. If God called you to invest, do investing. If God called you to be a stay-at-home mom, be a stay-at-home mom. But do what you're called to do and celebrate that. Live a life of fulfillment and not just chasing after stuff. And that's going to bring true joy, not just doing what other people do. Find what you do that brings happiness to you, what God put in your heart, and that's going to make a big, big difference. So basically, the older I get, turning mistakes into opportunity, the older I get, the more I realize I'm really, really, really good at making mistakes. And I think all of us are going to realize that. Like, the older we get, the more we realize we don't have life quite figured out yet. We wish we did, but if we're really honest with ourselves, we don't. And one of my weaknesses is I will tend to trust people almost too quick. I know that sounds a little weird, but if I meet a total stranger, I'm at a seminar, convention, I'd like to fly different places and go to real estate conventions or seminar, different things like that. I'll meet somebody and it'll be a total stranger, and with an hour or two, I feel like I know them really well, and they're a great person, and they have a great pitch, and man, what they're doing is amazing, and I'll give them money and say, hey, I'll invest in you, I believe in you, and this is great, and some of them didn't turn out too good. So what I'm trying to say is use wisdom when you do things, and maybe learn from people that trust too quick. But the flip side of the coin is I would rather make that mistake than never trust nobody and go through life thinking everybody's out to get me and I can't ever trust anybody. Am I making any sense? I know it sounds a little weird. I would rather err on the side that I did err on and make some mistakes and lose some money than err on the side of everybody in the world's horrible and trying to take advantage of me. But just, when I talk, I like to look at both sides of the coin. Like, there's going to be people out there, especially in the real estate business and the syndication world and different worlds, that they're not always honest. And it's just this side of heaven, that's just facts. And we need to realize that and be aware of that. But then there's other people you're going to meet and you're going to do life with that are, and them are the people you want to run with. And when you find them people, it's awesome running with them people and doing life together. James 1:2 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials." So seriously, I want to know in this room, is there anybody that was laying in bed, couldn't sleep at night because you have a horrible problem that you're dealing with, and you're like, wow, this is just pure joy. This is exciting. This is awesome. I can't believe that this is happening to me. I'm so glad. I mean, it's in the Bible. Like, do we not believe the Bible? But if you read the next verse, I think it puts it in context for us. Basically, the next verse talks about when you learn from these problems and mistakes, it makes you smarter. And I think that's when the joy comes, is when you learn from your mistakes, you realize that, okay, it wasn't fun. I might have lost money. Things might have happened that I wish didn't happen, but you learn from them, and that's where the joy comes from. And then the last verse talks about, verse 5 talks about if you want to make less mistakes, basically ask God for wisdom and he'll give you wisdom. So I just love the way the Bible has so many different references about investing and about life and about learning and about doing things well. Even if you're not a believer, I would still study the Bible just to learn how to invest. That's how great. Read Proverbs. I used to read a proverb almost every day. You can read it. You do one proverb a day. You go through it in about a month. Then I do it all over again. Then I do it over again and over again. I just think it's such a good habit. Most of the time, I feel lack of success comes from the lack of making mistakes. And let me preface what that means. If you make mistakes over and over and over and don't learn from them, yeah, that's probably not a good, healthy way. But if you're making mistakes and learning from them, eventually you're going to make good decisions. Or if you make mistakes and don't learn from them, I mean, anybody in this room ever hear the term stubborn as a mule? Don't raise your hand if you're that person. And don't look at anybody, they'll think you mean them. But it's okay to be stubborn in some things, because perseverance, being stubborn, helps you push through difficulties, helps you push through the naysayers saying you're not good enough, you can't do it. But being stubborn by not learning from mistakes, that's not going to be helpful in life. So the next point, how COVID reshaped Shady Maple. Wow, that I could spend an hour on. I think Jake put that one in there because I definitely do not want to talk about COVID. But fortunately, yeah, COVID was horrible. I mean, this smorgasbord building, we were on vacation with my family out in Colorado, and the day I got back, we had to shut this building completely, close our doors. Didn't have a choice. We thought there's no way they're going to make a shutdown. If they do make a shutdown, we're not shutting down. Well, we shut down. And that was hard. I mean, there was a lot of crazy things said during that time. We thought worst case scenario, we shut for maybe 7 days, maybe 14 if the world's ending. Well, we were shut for, 5 months? Then we reopened, and then a couple months later, they shut us down again between Thanksgiving to Christmas, our busiest time every single year, we're shut down again. So that was a turbulent time for us. I mean, I don't often lose sleep, but I lost sleep during that time. And we couldn't just pay hundreds and hundreds of employees not to work, so we laid everybody off. We promised them as soon as we can, we'll hire them back. When we went to hire them back, a lot of people were like, they believed all the naysayers. The naysayers were saying there'll never be a smorgasbord ever again in the history of the United States because of COVID, nobody's ever going to go down a line again and get food that somebody else might have contaminated just by being close to it. And so a lot of our employees, we went to hire them back, they had jobs somewhere else. They were working and moved away or something because they thought there never would be a smorgasbord again. So it was almost like starting a business from scratch again with new employees. And we went on a major hiring binge that year and hired, I think, 150 people in 1 year. And then you got to do the training and everything. But it was a tough year. And it was a tough year probably for everybody. I'm sure everybody in this room can think of one person, a loved one, that they might have lost during that time. I had a really close friend that I thought, man, this guy was high energy. He was active. He worked hard. I thought, man, if he gets COVID, if anybody can handle it, he can. And within a couple of weeks, he passed away. And I'm like, wow, like, why, God, did that happen? Like, in my mind, he was in the prime of his life. I was looking forward to doing a trip with him the following year, and now he's not here. And I'm sure all of us had that memory through COVID. And my conclusion I finally came to on this side of heaven, we don't have all the answers. And I think we need to be okay with that. I think when we do get to heaven, we're going to be like, number one, I'm glad I didn't know that answer. Number two, now that I know all the reasoning of why it happened, it all makes sense. But right now, I think for myself, knowing that I don't need to know all the whys and all the hows and being okay with it was something I learned through COVID, probably my biggest takeaway through COVID. There's a lot of other things through business too, like the one good thing through COVID was even though the smorgasbord was closed, our grocery store probably had double the sales a lot of days than it normally does because everybody, instead of going to restaurants, was going to grocery stores, so our sales would double a lot of days for that reason. So we actually did better during COVID than with only half our business open, which looking back, that's still, in my mind, not possible. I'm still not sure how that happened. And then the PPP on top of that and everything else. But it was just a really, really crazy time of family members being upset at each other over different things. And yeah, I hope and pray we never need to go back through that time period again. But it was a tough time. Using your why to affect your sphere of influence. So basically what I mean by that is we all have a sphere of influence that we influence each other or people around us. I don't care if you're 5 years old, you're probably influencing somebody, you're leading somebody. It might be a younger brother or sister, somebody you play with, somebody, but everybody in this room is actually a leader regardless you know it or not. And we all have and to me that's the why of why I do things. I mean, the reason I do things, the why, is to help other people, to influence other people, to change culture, to make a difference. If we're just about achievement and doing this and doing that and making money, I guarantee you'll die miserable. But if you have a bigger purpose in life, you have a why, it's going to be really fulfilling and you're really going to care about what you do and you won't burn out. Lessons from leading 800 people. That was another one that Jake brought in that I thought was really interesting because I feel the biggest lessons I learned is just to develop healthy habits. We talked about this earlier, but I'm just interested in the room. Is there anybody that has a daily habit that you feel is really beneficial for you? It's something that maybe you started a year or two ago and if you just did it for a week, it's not a habit. It just has to be something you do like on a regular basis for a year or two, that you do on a regular basis and you feel it helped you either emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally, in some way, shape, or form. So I'd just like to hear some feedback on some things you did that are healthy habits that you have in your life, because it's really easy to form a bad habit. You don't have to try it all. I mean, they just happen. But it's really hard to form a really healthy, good habit that helps you in multiple ways. So who here has some habits that you would share? Go ahead.
Last year I decided I'm going to be running 1,000 miles for the
1,000.
And so I would run 25 miles minimum a week, and then that developed into another goal of doing 100 miles a month. And I never slept so good in my life. I sleep, regardless what's going on, I get to bed, I sleep well, and I've never felt as good physically in my life.
Wow.
Amazing to me, because I'm a lot older than I used to be.
That's awesome. Who else has a healthy habit like that, either for health or for anything?
It's kind of a similar theme, but I run every single day, first thing in the morning. So whether we're on vacation or Christmas Day, or it sounds kind of bizarre, but I guarantee if anyone does it for a couple of weeks, you may never go back again because it totally changes your day.
Yeah, I personally hate running, but it's something I do anyway because I know it's good for myself and my body, and it helps me sleep at night rather than. We good now? Yeah, much better. I must have bumped an off button. But yeah, like today, for example, I got to work early, got home. I ran around the block, which is, our block's like 2 miles, it's not far. And then I did a sauna, cold plunge, got a shower, and came here. And for me, that's stuff that I feel is just really helps me. I think the battery's gone on this thing. Is it still good? Okay, sorry about that. But yeah, for me, that helps me get into a healthy habit where I feel energized and feel like, yeah, I can really, it clears my head when I get home. Another thing I do when I'm on the way home, often I go through a covered bridge right before I get into my driveway, and that's a place where I basically, okay, all the stuff at work, I'm leaving it behind. When I go in to meet my wife and kids, I'm ready to meet them and not bringing the stresses of life into the home, but I'm leaving that outside the home, and I'm coming in cheerful, happy, and a father of the home that is excited about seeing his family and not just sharing about maybe challenges that happen throughout the day. One more share about a habit you do. Eat quality food. Donuts. But yeah, that is a big difference. I think this battery's gone.
Okay, let me see. Sometimes you have extra ones there, but I don't think there is right now. It comes out at the bottom here, right?
I think the podium's on. I can use the podium.
I can see if I can get this back over.
I'll see if I'm able to talk without walking around. But yeah, I think it's so important to develop some kind of habit where you're something that helps you emotionally, physically. For myself, I try to read through the Bible every single year. I usually do it by audio. I just listen to it as I'm driving or something. But for me, it just engages me where I want to be. It keeps my mind on a clear. And if you fill your mind with enough of good things, I'm convinced the things that aren't good, after a while, they don't have the traction they used to have. I'm just convinced of that. And I'm sure everybody in this room would agree with that. Another thing I try to do is I try to encourage someone every single day. When you're leading 800 people, the biggest complaint we get from our employees when we do surveys is they don't feel appreciated, or they don't feel part of the team, or they don't feel like anybody cares. So I tell all my managers to do this, and I do it myself also, but every day I'll put in my calendar as a reminder, and my calendar is completely full every day with reminders and different things like that, but I'll put in my calendar every single day, like, just encourage somebody. So I might go up to an employee and say, hey, you built this produce display with these apples and oranges, and you did a really good job, and it looks extra nice, and just thank you, and really appreciate that. And that took, 10 seconds, maybe less, and it absolutely changed that person's day and made them feel appreciated and made them feel honored. And I would recommend every person in here does that. If you don't have any employees, do it with your kids or your wife or your spouse or your husband or whatever. But encourage somebody somehow every single day verbally. Some people would rather write a note. That's just as effective. We have employees here that have quit, and 10, 15 years later, they came back and said they still had the notes from when people gave them thank you notes here, and they keep them and don't throw them away. So there's a lot of power in our words, and I like to think of every word that we speak. It's almost like when you ever throw a stone in a pond and watch the ripples. It's like every word you speak, it goes out of your mouth, and it just creates ripple effects. And unfortunately, when we say something we shouldn't say, the same is true. You can't get it back in your mouth, and it can cause the same effect. So another thing that I learned from leading 800 people is just to practice extreme ownership. I just read a book about extreme ownership. It was written by a Navy SEAL. Really, really good book. He talked about when anything went wrong, he was the leader of a group of Navy SEALs. And he said when anything went wrong, he didn't care what it was. He said, it's my mistake. I own it. Something I did wrong caused this. And a lot of times it was a miscommunication where he told people, okay, we're going to meet here. I'm going to do this. And they would meet at the wrong place. And it would be in the middle of he went through the Iraqi war. And his team got ambushed and somebody got hurt. And he said it literally wasn't my fault because the guy misunderstood my directions and went to the wrong spot. But yet it was my fault because I didn't make sure he understood the directions I gave him and didn't communicate well enough. So one thing I learned at 800 employees here is if you don't communicate well and you create a lot of misunderstandings on a regular basis, it's really, really going to affect your leadership ability. When you're communicating, it's really easy to miscommunicate. It's really hard to communicate where people actually understand you. I wrote an email the other day, and I accidentally bumped the caps button when I was writing the email. And I saw the whole email was written in all uppercase. I'm like, oh, well, what's the big deal? I just send it. And about 2 days later, the person comes back to me like, were you upset at me? I'm like, why? Well, you wrote in all capital letters, and it looked like you're screaming at me and you're upset at me. I'm like, I never knew that writing in all capitals is screaming or being upset at somebody. But what we need to realize is that, and did you ever speak text and then send it and read it later? Don't ever do that. Speak text does not always work. I sent some really crazy things. Unfortunately, people that were friends, and I could go back and say, oh, I didn't mean that, and yeah, I could recover from that. But I wrote a couple things down here that I think are just fun facts. Good companies study their competition and adopt some of their successes if it fits them. Great companies have good companies adopting their successes. So basically what I'm saying is, are you a leader or follower? Different stage of your life you're going to be following. Different stage of life you're going to be leading. Both are okay. Both are good. But every now and then you're called to be a leader, and being a leader is not always easy. But I feel it's what a lot of you in this room are called to do. An example of that would be our birthday program that I talked about earlier. We were one of the first people in this area that ever came up with the idea. This was I think it was about 20 years ago, where we came up with this idea. It's actually my dad and I had the idea to give a free birthday and everybody's meal. And we pitched it to the management team, and all our managers were like, that is the dumbest thing they ever heard. I mean, we're going to lose too much money. Our profits will go down. It's going to be a disaster. It's too hard to monitor it. How are we going to know if people come in and don't tell the truth and it's their birthday or not? And what if they just come in with one person all the time and don't bring a group of people? The net profits will fall. And so we're like, wow, that must be a terrible idea. So we tabled it. About a year later, I'm like, man, I just feel this is going to be a good idea. So we pitched it again, and everybody was still against it. We decided we're just going to do it anyway. So we did it anyway, and we implemented it, and it started really slow and didn't catch on. And the first couple years was only like a couple hundred, next couple years a couple thousand. We're like, wow, this program's probably not really worth it. And then all of a sudden it just started catching. Where the word, you ever hear the term it went viral? It went viral. This was before Facebook. And somehow the word got out and we started hitting 80, 90,000 people every single year, free birthdays. And fortunately, most people are bringing not just one person with them, but a lot of people bring 15, 20, 30 people with them when they come. And it does pencil. It works quite fine. But then also another thing we do at the store is we make 1,000 different recipes from scratch every single week. That includes things we make up here, things we make at the grocery store, different bakery items we make. We make over 1,000 recipes, and then we have them available in the grocery store and up here, obviously. But in the grocery store, we have a program 20, 30 years ago we started this where we make food, anything from a casserole to meatloaf and mashed potatoes and green beans. We put it in a container, and people can take it home and heat it up and eat it. And we've been doing that for 20, 30 years. And I was at a food show a few years ago, and a person came up to me and said, you're not going to, I think it was in Las Vegas at a food show, it was a seminar, and this lecturer was up here like I am, talking to us and saying all the greatest new trends and greatest new ideas out there. And he's like, this is the best trend ever. Everybody got to get on board. You got to start making these meals and putting them out and have people be able to take meals home and take them home and eat them. I'm like, we've been doing that for 20 years. And there's a lot of things like that take time, but if you have perseverance, eventually, yeah, it will catch on. The next point I have here is true joy comes from a generous heart. That's something I learned a lot from my different mentors. I always had mentors in my life, coaches. Ever since I'm 20 years old, I have at least 1 or 2 life coaches that I meet with on a monthly basis. And it also came from my grandpa. My grandpa was probably one of the most generous people on earth. I don't know if anybody ever met him. It's my mom's dad. Henry Martin was his name. He was a deacon in the Horny Mennonite Church. And he was probably one of the most generous persons in Lancaster County. Like, if he would see a person in need, he couldn't help himself. He had to help them. It was just part of his DNA, how God made him. And a lot of times my parents were working 60, 70, 80 hours a week when I was little, so he'd be my babysitter. So I'd just tag around with him, whatever he did. And one of the things he did is if something broke down here and we needed parts or something, he would take his van and go get parts or go get supplies or whatever we needed, and I'd always ride with him. And I can't remember one time going by a hitchhiker and not picking the person up and taking them where they want to go and giving them food or something like that. It's part of who he was. And my mom used to be like, you mean you picked up hitchhikers with my son? And like, how you know it was safe? He's like, oh, well, I don't know. But that's just who he was. He's very generous. And I feel my brother and I, my parents, have received that generous spirit and are trying to pass it to our children too. Because I think having a generous heart brings true joy. And I don't mean just giving money to people that, some people, if they ask for money, you give them money, it actually hurts them. You know what I mean by that? If somebody has an addiction and they're asking for money and you give them money and they go support their addiction, you didn't help that person at all. But when you truly help someone, where you mentor them, coach them, get beside them, speak life into them, that brings true joy to them and to you. And that's exciting. I think that's one of the most important things in life is helping people like that. We also, our family's big on mission. So I did many mission trips around the world, and we support a mission, an orphanage in India, and we also support a place in Nepal where they rescue people out of sex slavery, give them a home, tell them about the Bible, tell them about Jesus, teach them life skills, and eventually they graduate from a college and start life on their own. But I've been to both them places and literally saw children rescued off the streets that probably would not be alive today if I didn't help that missionary start that orphanage or start that rescue home. And that brings a lot of satisfaction to me to be able to do that. And that's one of the whys of why I work hard each and every day to be successful is to be able to do things like that. And that's really exciting when we get to partner with people like that. So I'd recommend everybody finds, first of all, a why bigger than yourself that you can support outside of your here, but also find a why that you can be passionate about for yourself, because both are important. And the last point I have here is we should all have a goal we cannot complete by ourselves. And basically it ties into what I'm talking about earlier. Is I think it's really, really important to have a goal that you cannot complete by yourself. If your goals are all easy, or you can just do it by your own gumption, or whatever you want to call it, by your own willpower, it's probably too small of a goal. I love partnering with other people, creating teams. None of us are experts in every field. I like what you said about the management company. I like what the other person said about not partnering 50-50. I think I would never partner 50-50 with anybody on investment. That's a conversation for another time, but I learned from some things like that. But I would partner with a group of people that's not a 50-50 partnership, that have experts in different fields. One might have experts in accounting. One might have experts in being a lawyer. One might have experts in partner with, you're never going to be an expert in everything you do. If you try to do everything, I learned really early on, I'm not real good at managing properties. So I buy properties and get someone else to help me with that. When I try to manage myself, I usually don't take time to do it right, and then I eventually get somebody to do it right, and it costs me double. But I think we all have examples like that, but find out what you like to do and do it really, really well and do it excellence and learn how to be fast at it, and find other people to partner with to do the things that you would rather not do yourself. I think countless fortunes and failures owe their outcome to leverage. So we didn't talk about this much, but Ben, you'll talk a little bit about the opening, about leverage, about what are you comfortable with when you do investing? What are you comfortable with in leverage? Like, of your net worth, how much do you leverage? And does anybody in here have a perfect number of like what's good, what's bad? What part of your net worth should you leverage, or what percentage should you leverage on a property? Or Benya, what were you thinking? That's actually a really good answer, because my answer was it's going to be different for every person depending in the stage of your life. If you're single, don't have any kids, that might be a time to take some risk, and especially if you can still sleep at night. But if you're in a different situation and the risk rewards a little differently, you want to weigh that pros and cons of everything. Every time you do a deal, I think you should weigh the pros and cons, because some risk is okay. I believe leverage is actually biblical. Look at the story of the talents. But I want you to be able to sleep at night too. It's really important you can sleep at night. If you're not getting your sleep, a lot of other things start happening with your physical health, your mental health, and everything else. The other interesting statement I have written down here is the best and worst managers drive their employees as hard as they can. Isn't that an interesting sentence? The best and worst managers drive their employees as hard as they can. So basically, with 800 employees here, we want everybody to work to the best of their ability and to get as much done as they can get done without burning out. But if you do it in the wrong way, they're going to burn out. But if you do it in the right way, they're going to be excited about what they accomplished and be like, wow, that was a fun day, that was exciting. And I saw both happen many, many times over many different departments. So you're never going to get it right each time, but the encouragement is treat each other people as you want to be treated, and make sure you're treating people to their ability and not to your ability. Especially, I've been doing this for 35 years, as Jake said, and when we have a person, when we hire a new employee, it's easy to assume they know what I know their first day, and I got to keep doing a mental check, like, okay, what was it like the first time I did that job? Like, what did I know and not know? And it helps me train them at their level versus training them in a way where they don't understand what I said. I walk away, I come back an hour later, like, why'd you do it that way? And it just creates a lot of, prevents a lot of confusion. So Jake said I'm going to also do some future predictions for investors.
That's what you said.
I just wrote that to get a crowd here. No, I actually do have some predictions. If some of my close friends know that I enjoy doing predictions, I'll actually write them down and email it out. Like, 2 years from now, I think this is going to happen, or 5 years from now, I think this is going to happen. Just warning everybody, I'm only right about 50% of the time, so I'm just warning you. But here are my predictions for better or worse. So about half these probably will come true. But what Ben was saying earlier about predictions, most of mine line up pretty close to his. So I'm expecting the next 3 years, inflation and interest rates to be 6 to 8%. I'm expecting Bitcoin to follow the stock market. 3 years from now, I'm expecting it to be around in the 50s. Until it has a daily usage, I don't think it's going to skyrocket to 1 million. Will that ever happen? Who knows? The stock market, I think it'll keep going up the next 3 years, but no better than inflation, because I think we're going to stagnate a little bit because of inflation and the shrinking middle class. Properties, I agree with what Ben was saying. I think properties, 400,000 to 1.5 million, they'll keep going up in value a little bit, but not as much as properties that are less than 400,000 and over 1.5 million. And the reason for that prediction is the middle class is shrinking. For better or worse, it just is. We got to accept that fact. With everything the government did the last 4 years, especially printing trillions and trillions of dollars, most of it floated to the top, and the middle class is going to shrink with taxes going up and inflation and everything else that happened. My next prediction, I think Trump's going to pick another Supreme Court justice. Some of you knows what that means. But I do feel that 3 to 5 years from now, I think something interesting is going to happen. I think, and I talked to a lot of friends and some pastor friends I have about this, and they pretty much agree with me on this, that I think we're in a Joseph season. If you remember the story of Joseph when he was in Egypt, there was a dream, and there was 7 years of good, and then there were 7 years of not so good. And I think we're in a Joseph season right now where for a lot of people can make money right now. A lot of Fortune 500 companies, they're making record profits. That's why the stock market keeps going up. A lot of people in this room are making money this year. So I think we're in a Joseph season. And I think 3 to 5 years from now, it might reverse, and we might see a season where it's not a Joseph season, and where people like this in this room are called to be a Joseph and help people that are struggling. So it's just my prediction, what some pastor friends of me are also thinking. Hopefully I'm completely wrong. I might be, but it's just what I'm feeling like. And it also, Ben was talking about what Darrell said in an email this morning, Darrell Eberle. It lines up with sort of what he's saying too, is every country has cycles of corrections. It's been a long time since we had a cycle of correction that was like some things we had in the past. So, in conclusion, I do this with a lot of my management team. I do a lot of trainings for management team, and this is one of the things I do with them, so I'm going to conclude with this. I talk about to them, like, focus on what's important and think about what's important in your life, in your family, especially if you have children. How will you be remembered? And then also, we don't have time to do this tonight, but what I also have my managers do is then I have them write their obituary and then read it to the class. And it's a fun exercise. You ever want to do something really, really interesting? write your obituary as if you just passed away and somebody's writing it for you, and it's printed in the paper, and then read it to your wife and then read it to your kids. It's a really cool exercise. It helps you reflect on, number one, what's important in life, number two, what I want to be remembered for, and number three, am I where I want to be right now? You start getting instant feedback. So I really enjoy things like that. I like thinking long term. I like thinking life's short, eternity's long. What's that actually look like? And that helps put things in perspective for me. So if anybody has any questions or comments, we have a few extra minutes. I did that on purpose. I ended a little bit early just in case anybody has any questions, or I like things that are interactive. So yeah. Jake, you have anything?
I do. So maybe I'll get up here behind this mic for a little bit here. But I'm sure there's plenty of people that have questions out there too. And if you can, repeat the question back if someone out there asks them. So a couple of things. You mentioned about the going crabbing. You had something in your bio about spearfishing too. I need to know a little bit about that.
Another little hobby I picked up the last 5 years of spearfishing, and I did it in Belize so far and also in Hawaii and somewhere else, I forget where, but something I really enjoy. It's not an easy sport. I never did it with the scuba gear. I just do it with free diving. But in Belize, it was pretty easy because we're in shallow water. When we did it in Hawaii, we're in about 100-foot deep water, and we're going after like mahi and tuna. And we saw them and we were chasing them. The problem was, before we could get to the fish, some sharks came in the way. So it was quite an interesting experience. And the guide that was with us that warned us, he said, if any sharks come here, he said, it's no big deal. It happens all the time. Don't worry about it. He said, just stay beside me. I know what to do. I'm like, okay. And sure enough, about an 8-foot oceanic blacktip shark came at us, 2 of them. And sharks are curious if you don't know this or not, so they came right at us. And he said, he told us early, before we went in the water, he said, as long as you don't panic, it won't kill you. But he said, if you thrash around and try to get back to the boat, it will kill you. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to panic. Your heart's beating like 200 miles an hour, and we're swimming about 5 foot underneath the water, about 10 foot underneath the water. We're swimming with spear guns. And this shark comes up to us, nose to nose, and my guide just takes his hand, takes his nose, and pushes the shark away, and it swims away. And then it comes back and does it all over again. He did it 3 times. But basically what he said, the sharks don't think you're food. They're just curious to see what you are because they're not scared of nothing. And they think you're food, they'll eat you. But if you push your nose away, they don't think you're food because nothing else does that to them. So it was really fun. It's a good way to get an adrenaline rush if you ever want to do that. I can give you the name of the guy in Hawaii that does it.
That's really cool. The reason I asked that is because I know you like adventure.
Yeah.
And I thought there had to be a cool story that would go with that. I got one more question for you, and then you can take questions from the crowd. So the birthday meals, did you say 90,000 something? So like divided by 300 days per year is like, or 6 days a week, is like 300 per day.
Yeah, some days are more than 300 and some days are less.
So I probably heard this before, but I forget. What's a busy day in the smorgasbord? How many people do you get through there on a big day?
An average day is maybe 3,000 to 6,000 people, but we went up to 11,900 already. Like the day before Mother's Day is always our busiest day of the year. I don't know why. I guess nobody's allowed to eat at home Mother's Day or something.
Wow.
But the day before Mother's Day, we're closed Sundays, so the day before Mother's Day is always our busiest day, and every year. And the year before COVID, we had 11,899 or something like that there. And we're still not back to that numbers yet, but we're close.
Wow. Wow.
You guys hire a lot of people. I'm curious if you found any secrets to hiring success.
You're asking if we found any secrets to hiring. That's a great question. Right after COVID, when our business started coming back, we were running about 55 to 100 people short for a while. And I still don't know how we got through them times. We had a lot of employees working 70, 80 hours a week. Fortunately, they were willing to. But we put a major hiring binge on. We were doing everything to hire. And is there any one secret? I don't know. But for us, it was building a culture where people are cared about and feel like they're important. And we started doing a referral bonus for any of our employees that convince one of their friends or somebody they know to come in here and work. They get a bonus. Then we did a hiring bonus for people coming in. For certain positions, we're up to $1,000 a person just to do a hiring bonus. We're going to increase that probably for certain, like meat cutter skill positions. But the biggest thing is just having a good culture where it attracts workers, because we're now almost completely fully hired. First time that happened in 7 years. We got used to running 20, 30 people short as just normal. And we're now almost fully hired for the first time in 7 years. Another thing we started doing is if you work Saturdays, it's $3 extra per hour. Every hour you work on Saturday for any employee, anytime. That moved the needle. We hired a lot of people after we did that initiative, because our biggest day here in the store is obviously Saturday. We need a lot of employees. For some silly reason, nobody likes to work Saturdays. Everybody likes their weekends off, so that helped encourage people that working Saturdays is worth it.
How many total employees do you have?
We're almost 800, not quite, almost 800. With that's a lot of part-timers. Full-timers, a lot less.
So when you analyze investments, how do you determine if it's too small to be worth your time and effort? And how do you determine where that cutoff is, or how is a deal worth your time and effort?
The question is when's a deal worth your time and effort? Like what dollar amount? What's that cutoff? Is that correct?
Not really. It was how do you determine whether it's big enough deal to be worth your time, putting in the effort, investing the money?
When's it a big enough deal to be worth my time, worth investing? I mean, for myself, I'm probably different than most people. I have a full-time job, obviously, as CEO of Shady Maple, so I can't afford to do a lot of outside investments that take a lot of time. So for me, it has to be something that is very passive for me. It takes very little of my time. I think the question's going to be answered differently by every person. When I was younger and had a little more flex time, I would invest in a $100,000 property and fix it up myself because I enjoyed it. I enjoy swinging a hammer and things like that. But where I'm at now, yeah, I don't want to touch it unless it's 7 digits and don't take any of my time, and pretty much guaranteed that it's not going to go crazy south on me. But yeah, it's a tough question. I don't really have an answer for you.
So are you doing more commercial as far as the investments on your side, commercial versus residential, or units, bigger multi-units and stuff?
Do I do commercial or residential? I'd like to mix it up. I'm a big believer in not putting all your eggs in one basket, so I mix it up. We developed the Houston Run property over in Gap. Some of you probably know that. That was probably one of the bigger commercial investments we did. It's 99% sold now. We still got to sell the water plant, but that's under agreement too. So that was one of the bigger commercial things we did recently. But we own Service AC Moore in Lancaster. We owned that whole complex. Just sold that in the last 5 years. But I also own quite a bit of apartments too and residential. So I'm a big person of diversity. I got burned too often to put my eggs in one basket. And I like to have things diversified and have different things in different fields, because it seems there'll be a period of 10 years where one does well, then it flip-flops. So I like things that don't take a lot of my time, because I have 4 children, 2 in school, they're in sports, I like to go to their games, and plus I work here, so I'm more focused on things that don't take my time, but I still enjoy investing. I'm not going to stop doing that.
What are some practical ways to prepare for a downturn, not only to survive yourself, but to help other people?
Ways to survive a downturn to help others and yourself. Yeah, we have a group of people to get together every now and then, and we talk about exactly what you're talking about. And obviously, you want to have some cash reserves. That's number one. And a lot of times, knowledge is even more important than cash reserves. So have a group of people that you can talk to and get advice from. And I know when COVID hit, we didn't know which way to turn, what to do. I started meeting with a group of 4 people every Saturday at lunchtime in my office, 4 people from different fields, just to talk together. And it just gave me a space where I can vent and speak out, and like, what do I do here, what do I do there? And a lot of times all we did is eat food and talk and things like that. But that really helped me get through that time of uncertainty. So I think having groups of people around you is as key as anything, where people you can talk to and be real with and tell people your frustrations. But yeah, have cash reserves. Don't be over leveraged. Have things in, if you have things and people own things that people have to have, they're never going to be worthless. Like, people have to have a place to live. They have to have food to eat. They have to have clothing. If you own things that people, if you're owning just fancy office buildings, that need might go away. But if you have housing, especially low-end housing, low-income housing, there's always going to be need for it. This might look different. So.
Some of the main factors that the middle class is shrinking, and can you do something about that?
The main reason the middle class is shrinking is basically by the government taxing people by printing money. Every time they print money, it's just a tax in a different disguise. And until they stop doing that, the middle class is going to shrink, because most middle class across the United States, some, not all, but most, the wages are not keeping up. So their expendable income is going to shrink. And therefore, they're going to be able to afford less cars, less this, less that, less nice homes. And then most of the money is going to funnel up to the top 3%. It's just, yeah, until that stops, I don't know if I have any key answers for you, other than do well in your own field to make money to overcome the inflation rate. One more, and then I think we're 8:30. Jake said I had to stop at 8:30. I'm in trouble. But in the back.
What's the name of the book by ABC Lake?
Oh, I knew somebody was going to ask that. It's called Extreme Ownership. I don't remember the author. Wow, there it is. Shocko Willie? Mustn't have read the author's name. So.
I think you had one more in that corner, if you don't mind. Wasn't there a hand back there? Maybe not.
They were fixing their hair.
Okay, how about a big hand for Lynn? Wow, that was great. I just appreciate listening to Lynn tell stories and all of that. It's pretty fascinating to me, and I'm really grateful for this. It's probably not exclusive to our community, but just the generosity of people. Like, Lynn's a busy guy, right? You could hear from what he's talking about. He's got a lot of stuff going. He's got places he could be. He doesn't get paid to speak tonight. Hopefully you weren't expecting like a real big check after this, Lynn. I asked him, I emailed him, and he's like, sure, I'd be glad to do that. So just really appreciate that, Lynn. Like he said, he's not a professional speaker. He's not a speaker by trade. He's just a business person, not just a business person, but a business person that, in my opinion, has accumulated just a wealth of knowledge and experience over the years, and it is really, really great to get him in the room and just talk about that stuff. So really appreciate it. Interesting fact, the book that you gave away, the book that Joe won over there, The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, I gave one of those away last month. So that might be a clue. It's a good book. I mean, so when somebody asks me if like my favorite books, it's always like, well, in what category? I mean, if I could only pick one, it would have to be the Bible. You need to read for me, that's important. If you really want to learn about real estate, maybe it's another one, or there's kind of different categories, but the compound effect is just a really, it's a really good book on your daily habits, daily disciplines, and that type of thing. And it's simple. It's easy to read, fun stories. So highly recommend the book if you have not read it. So I think that is it. We're going to wrap it up for tonight. Yeah. Thanks for coming out, everyone. We are, I'm always open to ideas for speakers and topics. I should tell you guys, we generally have a board meeting twice a year. There used to be 5 of us on the board. I was hoping Chris Good would be here tonight. Are you in the room, Chris? I don't think I saw him. But we actually just added our 6th board member, and that's Chris Good. So it's Chris Good, myself, Joe Liofsky, Jeff Moeller, Daniel Fisher, and Abner Blank. So we get together usually twice a year, just discuss, things around the year for the group and so forth. So always looking for ideas and suggestions for speakers and topics. Doesn't mean we can use all of them. Don't mean they'll all work out. But if you have an idea for something like that, feel free to talk to me after the meeting or shoot me an email or something. Always looking for ideas and suggestions. So with that, we're going to wrap up. Do yourself a favor and connect with someone that you don't know in the room. Get to know somebody. And thanks for coming out. We will see you back here the first Wednesday evening in March.